Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of Positive Recovery MD. My name is Julie DeNofa, and I'm your host for today. So unfortunately, Dr. Powers is not with us, but I'm so stoked to have Grant on with us today that we just decided to go ahead, and we're excited to be together talking. So first and foremost, when I'm introducing Grant, I love his intro because the number one thing on his introduction was that he's a proud father to a 6-year-old angel first. And I've had the opportunity via Facebook to get to know his daughter a little bit, and she is amazing. Just watching her and watching Grant with her has been just really a great way to get to know who Grant is. So I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about his daughter during this podcast. And let me just tell you, she knows every word to some old school rap, hip hop, like all about it. And that girl, like she has my heart for sure. Grant's also a person in long-term recovery who specializes in addiction fitness. So I want to hear more about that, and definitely mindset development, which goes hand in hand what we do over here at Positive Recovery. One of his greatest joys is affirming others into their highest self. He helps show those who have struggled with addiction how to allow their pain to refine them rather than define them. Grant's mission is to show those same individuals that sobriety and physique goals are just the beginning, and that the same level of commitment can permeate every other area of their life, leaving no choice but to operate purely out of passion and purpose. And then he has a quote here that I want to share with you, listeners. It's, "Your current circumstances are not a true or accurate indicator of your full potential." So with that, I'm super stoked. I want to hear a little bit more about your recovery fitness thing. Just also want to share that I do know that he's in long-term recovery for over 7.5 years. So congratulations on that. Tell me a little bit about your deadlifting or heavy lifting, or go into that a little bit, because I don't know and our listeners don't know, but you call yourself an amateur and you look like a professional. So what is that?
Well, I say amateur because I'm prepping for a competition now. I have not actually competed as of yet. So I finally made that decision to go ahead and hire a coach and start working towards actually competing.
So before we get into your story a little bit, let me just ask you, how is it for you as a coach to have a coach?
It's mandatory. Honestly, my coach has a coach. It's no different than being in recovery. You don't want to work with a sponsor who doesn't have a sponsor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I wanted our listeners to hear that, because it's so important. Even in the clinical world, therapists have therapists, doctors have doctors. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your recovery story.
Sure. It's funny. Every time I tell my story, it always changes, right? It's always, I hit different things and I emphasize depending on what's going on in my life at that moment. And so I'm from Houston. I'm from Baytown, which is, I believe, where you're at right now, correct?
I'm in Garden Oaks, just outside the Heights.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah, so I'm born and raised Baytown, Texas. And so Baytown, if you've ever been through Baytown, it's it's a weird area. There's money there, there's a lot of poverty there, a lot of both, and in the sense that when I grew up, there was like everybody kind of partied with everybody, right? When I was going through school, like it didn't matter which side of the tracks you came from when it came to all this partying and hanging out after school or on the weekends. It was just a lot of everybody, you know what I mean? Everybody was kind of coming together and hanging out. And so I grew up playing sports. I was an athlete, just a natural competitor. I come from a family full of teachers and coaches. And so my mom's side of my family is literally every one of them is a teacher or a coach of some kind. Even some of my cousins are now, And probably that's what I would have done had I not ended up in legal trouble down the road. But, so my progression into my addiction it was kind of cliche, like I just kind of started partying and just the peer pressure, smoking weed, drinking, here and there. And the thing that really got me in trouble back then was honestly that I was smart enough and academically and talented enough athletically, naturally, that it made me kind of lazy, and it got me in trouble, and it got me to where I could kind of coast doing the bare minimum and do fine, up to a certain point at least. And that was kind of my downfall. Always, if I'd have known then what I know now about developing and refining your skill sets and all, man, it's
hindsight's always 2020.
Exactly. And that's why I like speaking with students now, if you can prevent them from going down that road. But anyways, I just kind of progressed into partying, and it was kind of evident fairly early that, like, for instance, through high school, I had to change friend groups multiple times because I would always get to a point with my partying or drug use that I would sort of go past whatever group of friends I was hanging out with at that time. And they'd get to a point where they're like, man, Grant, what you're doing is too much. We're not into all that. And so I would switch to a different friend group that was more in line with, what I was trying to do. And so on. And that happened multiple times. Ended up getting kicked out of high school my junior year towards the beginning. I had dislocated my shoulder playing football, got surgery, and ended up getting caught stealing a bunch of money out of people's lockers in the football locker room. I did that multiple times, and I finally got caught for it. And I went to treatment my first time.
How old were you when you first went to treatment?
17. It was in Starlight, actually, out in Kerrville, when they still had an adolescent program back then. Mm-hmm. This is the end of 2008. And, the thing is, and this is a very important piece right here, because even though I was 17, not yet really mentally ready to actually get sober, right? It was just, I was doing because my family made me. But the important piece there is that the seed was planted, and even though none of that stuff really made sense to me, or I couldn't relate to it quite yet, it was there, and it sort of grew over time. And so there was always this, even though I didn't stay sober. I went to Kerrville to Soberloon for a few months, about 4 or 5 months, maybe. Ended up back in Houston after I relapsed. Ended up homeless, basically the rest of that year, kind of in and out of sleeping in parks and couch hopping when I could and that kind of stuff. And I was only 17. I hadn't even turned 18 yet. I went to rehab again down at Bay Area Recovery Center, actually, in Dickinson, and still talk to those guys. Another opportunity, right? Another place where there was a great message there, a lot of great recovery there. And the seed again was planted a little bit more. And then after that little stint, everything that they promised me would happen happened very quickly. And what I will say is, I did a little bit of everything. Mostly a lot of benzos and that kind of stuff was a staple. But I eventually, I would go through these phases of doing different drugs. And when I finally got to IV methamphetamine, I'm really grateful that happened, because my life, I was getting in trouble. My life was sort of slowly getting worse. And when I started doing shooting meth, it just went, and so it sped the process up significantly. Things got really dark really quickly for me. I went to prison in 2011, and I went again in 2013. And especially the second time I went, it saved my life when I went to prison the second time, sincerely. For me, even though at that age, I only did 6 months the first time and a little over a year the second time, while at that age it seemed like a long time, it's not that. It's not really, not in the grand scheme, but it was enough for me to see what my life was about to become. Because every time I got in trouble, it was progressively worse. Some people were able to skate for a long time and do all the same things I did and never get in trouble. That's not my story. I just look like I look like trouble when I'm doing what I was doing. I'm a beacon for law enforcement, and so which turned out to be a good thing. It showed me that I was not immune to those consequences, because I think I had it in my head that like we all do, right? Not me. That's not going to happen to me. And when it did happen to me twice, I was like, shit, okay, all right. Mommy and daddy can't come take you away from the state of Texas, and so, I'm grateful for that. And obviously I started affiliating with some fairly dangerous people just because of those stints in prison. And again, it just exposed me to a side of things that I guess I was naive to before. And it showed me that while I pretended like I was a little gangster, that I wasn't nearly as gangster as I thought I was. When things got real, I was like, "Ooh, man, I don't know if this is for me." So when I got out that second time, I remember the day I got out, and I tell the story a lot. It was my mom came in and picked me up. She was waiting out in front of the unit for me. It's Pam Lynchner State Jail there in Atascocita. When I got in her car, she kind of reached over and grabbed my hand, and I grabbed hers, and we both started crying, And when I looked at her, I said, I'm never going to do that again. And the crazy, like I promise you, when I said that to her, I meant it completely, 100%. And within 2 hours, I was high. 2 hours, and that's what we always go back to, right? What that mental blank spot that we always talk about, that what happens from point A to B with that sane reasoning, right? That logic that says, is it going to be different this time? There was none of that. It was just my grandmother. We went to see my grandma, and she handed me on the way out the door, she handed me $50, and that was it. That was it. And I mean, something happened. It just clicked. And I was like, got money in my hand, started doing the calculating, and that was it, And so within 2 months, I committed another felony and basically hitchhiked to Kerrville just to get away from the law on the run. Didn't go there to get sober. And I went there, and about 2 weeks in, after getting high for a couple of weeks, we got invited to a meeting, and the rest is history. After that, it was very divine. You look, that's a time, right, where, and there's been many times after that since that I can say this, where you look back at a certain time in your life in which the whole trajectory of your life changed. And you go, man, if one little thing would have happened just slightly differently, everything would be different now at this point. You know what I mean? Like everything just sort of happened like in the perfect sequence to get me into that place, And I ended up in this meeting. My very first grant sponsor ever happened to be sitting in that meeting. And he came over after the meeting and got me, and he basically didn't give me a choice, and took me to another meeting. I was high actually at that meeting, and he didn't care. And this is another very important piece, in terms of how we, especially those of us in recovery, how we approach people. We can get evangelical sometimes about trying to, sway people into this way of life. And he sat me down and he said, "So Grant, are you ready?" Because he just hung out with me for a few days. Like he wasn't trying to be crazy. And he was like, "So Grant, are you ready to do something?" And this is what I said. I said, I think I'm just going to smoke weed for a little while and see how that goes. And he just looked at me and he's like, "It's okay. I love you anyways." And he didn't say anything else.
He was kind of willing to accept you where you were in that moment.
Right.
And did that did something for you?
It was, well, it caught me really off guard. It's not what I expected. I expected him to do whatever, just try to evangelize me and sway me and deter me. And he was just like, he showed me right then that his friendship was not contingent upon me being sober necessarily, which kind of it goes against the grain a little bit. It goes against how, sometimes how we teach people to set back, obviously within reason, right? And that set the foundation for the way I was going to approach especially my 12-step work going forward after I did get sober. Within a few days, I decided that was not going to work for me and that I needed to start into the work. I just wasn't ready to make that commitment. And so that set the stage for me. And so moving forward, I still had warrants out for my arrest. I handled all the legal issues, and I'm gonna kind of speed through some of the rest of this. But the very, that first 2 years of my sobriety, I hear people say sometimes, "Oh man, I don't miss early sobriety at all," and that's just not the case for me. I miss it a lot. Like that first year, especially where I'm doing H&Is like constantly. I'm sponsoring as many people as I can possibly handle, going to meetings, and not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to. I hadn't felt useful at all for any reason to anybody in a long time. And so just the feeling of feeling like I was needed, like that felt amazing for me. Mm-hmm. Like the fact that somebody needed me around for any reason, I was like, oh my God, finally. And so like the foundation stone of my entire recovery was centered around service and around just getting, putting other people's well-being ahead of my own, and then when we got sick, me and Courtney, my daughter's mother, we were 6 months sober each whenever we got pregnant. We did a lot of things in the beginning that, we don't tell people to do, but we were very, very firm in our understanding of what was number one, what was priority, which was this way of life, this body of work, the program, these principles, everything. Fast forward through all that, I got involved in the treatment industry. I started working at La Hacienda. I think I didn't really know yet exactly what I wanted to do, and I think this is why, as far as right now, when I communicate, when I talk to people, this is a piece of it, right? This is such a big piece, is getting sober is just the beginning. And obviously in the beginning, I had to just learn how to be an employee first, right? I had to learn how to just show up for work on time, pay my bills on time, do all that. I was growing up in sobriety too, because I was only 22, almost 23 when I got sober. So I was also learning how to just be a man, and be responsible. But at a certain point, I feel like it becomes extremely important to start to dive into this idea of purpose. And I don't mean purpose just in the context of AA or 12-step, work. That is important too. And that's the foundation, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. Then I started to really pursue this idea of what was my greater purpose, like what was my overall purpose and what I really wanted to do in life, and that changed so much over time. I started washing dishes at Laha. Then Sherry Layton there at La Hacienda, me and her became good friends, and she really was instrumental in, getting me into school because I thought I wanted to be a counselor, and then I decided I didn't want to do that, and I got involved kind of in the business development side, and I learned I had a real knack for developing relationships and doing business development. The entrepreneurial side of me got opened up. I started getting really involved with my fitness journey, and it was just like, there's like, okay, there's so many things now that I've got my life back, now that I'm like, I feel good. And that this addiction is like I'm handling this, that's no longer an issue. Now what? Because I don't want to ever be, and don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from these guys and I love them, but especially they're like in Kerrville, right? You go to these meetings, sometimes these noon meetings, right? And I would see these same old crusty guys, 30, 40 years sober, and they're sitting in the same chair that they've been sitting in for the last 30 years or however long. I'm so grateful to be sober, and I was like, man, that's not what I want. You know what I mean? I want so much more than that. And I'm going to say this, I feel like, and I don't mean to generalize all of 12-step or all of AA or anything like that, but there just seemed to sort of be this attitude held by some people that when people would start to express that they had bigger dreams and goals and wanted to go back to school and wanted to, get into business or whatever it was, there just sort of was this attitude held by some people that, well, just be grateful for what you have right now. Don't get ahead of yourself, which again, in the right context is good advice.
Right. Because I think like listening to you throughout, like I do believe that you do believe in the right here, right now, like what's present today, be present. That's actually part of a lot. I watch a lot of your stuff on social media and it is about being present, right. Being present to the situation that's in front of you. So sometimes that might come across differently. Right. And right. The language that we use around it, but like knowing that you're kind of a be present guy, how does that translate for you now?
It's tricky, right? How do I fully live in the present moment while also, I'll use recovery terms, right? We talk about pulling people with a vision, you know what I mean? And I think that I I've used that phraseology in so many other arenas because I think it's such a beautiful way to phrase it. It's not that I'm living in the moment, I'm trying, or at least I'm trying to, but I also have to continually be pulled with a vision of what I want my life to look like, and continuously, right? And this is why I fell in love with entrepreneurship, because when I got involved in the personal development side, right, there were so many parallels between what I was learning there and recovery, right, and the 12-step work. So many parallels, and I fell in love with it, and just this constant, right, this talk of putting myself, visualizing, constantly, making vision boards and doing all that stuff, and getting specific with my goals, and also overcoming there was almost this sort of not guilt, but I had over and over again been hammered with this dialogue of, well, just where you're at now is way better than where you were. So just be grateful, just be grateful for where you're at now. And I'm just like, I get so tired of hearing that, because
I want more.
Right. And I'm saying this is just for me. And I know not everybody has the same goals I do. And I'm always very careful to preface it with saying that, you know what I mean? And I know everybody has different ambitions and different goals and different things they want to do. But the thing is I think each individual owes it to themselves and to God. I think to do anything less than what your full potential is like a slapping God in the face. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of like speaking life into what you want. And exactly. So if you're creating a vision board, or you did create vision boards, like, did you nail it? Like, is the vision board that you created, have you, if I looked at those pictures, would I be like, oh yeah, this is his life now? Did you actually see it through?
Some, not all of it yet. And each year, the thing is, though, it changes though.
Yeah.
It changes as I grow, and I try not to become, there was a great talk I listened to by a guy who used to be he was the head of hostage negotiations for the FBI. I forgot his name. But he said, don't become so emotionally attached to one thing that you wouldn't take something better if it came along. And I just remember it caught me off guard a little bit, because then I started, obviously when I hear stuff like that, then I go inside, right? I get real introspective, and I start to think, okay, where am I doing that? How am I doing that? How am I maybe missing opportunities and missing things because I'm attached to something else that maybe no longer maybe it served me at one point, but it's not now, right? And just again, going back to, right, some of the 12-step literature, right? This, our lives now being characterized, or science even, right, being characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas, which no longer work, for new ideas, which do, right? And those old ideas did work at one point, and they got me to a certain point. And that comes with that sort of an identity crisis sometimes, where even in my own recovery, I transitioned from, in Kerrville, right, at a certain point, I was teaching Big Book and Mr. AA and sponsoring 1 million people and doing all that. And when I kind of shifted out of that a little bit, my life got more full, and I couldn't do quite as many H&Is, and I couldn't sponsor quite as many people. And I was going to my home group, but I wasn't making a bunch of other extra meetings, and I couldn't do Denny's every night with all the people, you know what I mean? And there was an identity crisis that happened with that, where that was a great time in my life and it got me to a certain place, but now it's time to pivot and continue to grow, and it's uncomfortable. But now, the thing about that is I've gotten sort of addicted to getting uncomfortable. Because whenever I start to do something that I start to feel the butterflies. For instance, I have an acting audition tomorrow. Did I ever really see myself becoming an actor? Is it going to happen? I don't know. I don't even really care. But I just saw a thing on Instagram asking for people who wanted to audition. And I said, hey, that makes me really uncomfortable. I think I'm going to go do that, But just, that's just an example of that, but my visions and what I want my life to look like, they change. They're always evolving. What's important to me is always changing. And now, right, even in terms of what I want for myself financially, it's all centered around being able to contribute. It's not about what I want for myself and being able to accumulate lots of things, which I want that stuff too. But it's more about being able to have enough to contribute when and wherever I want to. You know what I mean? Getting to a place where instead of selling treatment, I can fund treatment, just, stuff like that. And just living in purpose. And that's really been what's now, at least currently, what's on my mind so much is really sort of pinpointing what my gift is. Like, what is that thing that God gave me that comes easy to me and comes more difficult to most, right? And I'm saying this on this podcast, not just for me, but for other people who are listening, who are maybe trying to figure out what it is they want to do with themselves. Because like I said, the reason I talk about this so much is because in our world, right, working with people who are struggling with addiction and mental health issues, the beginning part of getting sober a lot of times can be the easiest, right? We're professionals, it's starting. We're forever starting. But sustaining long-term success and getting people beyond that initial, whatever it is, year, 18 months, for me, what I see, this may be anecdotal, is that they get sober and then there's this sort of now what, now what? And if people can't learn how to take care of themselves health-wise, if they can't learn how to balance a checkbook and become financially literate and figure out what all of those things are so important. They're so important. They're vital, and if we can encourage people not to just not just for a paycheck, right? Not what are you doing just to make money, but what are you doing every day that is fulfilling, that makes you feel like you're making an impact here? Because that ultimately, if I had to sum it all up, I would say that what the most important thing for me is now is to make sure that I leave the biggest possible impact I can before I leave this earth. I want to affect positively as many people as I possibly can, teach a man to fish, right? That old saying. And that's why the hallmark, I think, of at least for me, the way I would measure my success. So John Maxwell, I know I keep going off on these tangents, but
you're good.
John Maxwell in 21 Laws of Leadership, phenomenal book. He says there are leaders who just attract followers, and then there are a different type of leader who attract other leaders. And again, introspection, right? Okay, what am I doing here, right? And there's people you'll see who they forever want followers, but they're always really afraid of the people that follow them ever surpassing them in any way. And that's the opposite of what I want. For me, the greatest measure of my success in terms of being a mentor or a coach or anything like that is that anybody I ever work with would surpass me, would become better than me in every way. And for me, that's like, and I get a lot of that from my grandfather, I think that's how he was.
Yeah, I love that. And for you, like, it seems like you're having an impact in many different ways, right? Like in the recovery world, helping folks get into recovery, stay in recovery, coach, in terms of sponsorship, you have that kind of program that you work within the 12 steps. Then in your coaching that you're doing, personal coaching, right. And then also from the fitness side of things. So how do you incorporate when you're working with people specifically, and how soon into recovery did you get into the fitness aspect?
It was about 6 months in for me. It was right after actually we found out that Courtney was pregnant. And then it was sort of this, it's not just about me now. And working with people, the reason I love coming at it from a fitness angle is because I think that with fitness, it's measurable, right? We set these goals, and other than getting sober, for me, getting sober was my first evidence that I could do something I set my mind to. But then fitness was next. And once I started to see evidence that if I worked with somebody who knew what they were doing, who had already been where I had been and is now where I wanted to be, who was knowledgeable, and I was willing to learn and work hard and be consistent, that if I set goals, I could reach those goals. And as I started to see evidence of that, right, because it's not about the fitness, and that's what I try to tell everybody. It's not just about you getting a six pack or you being ripped or whatever. It's about the idea that once you start, right, it's neurological. You know what I mean? We're talking about forging these new pathways and reprogramming, to a subconscious level, where now I see evidence that I set this goal, I figure out what I need to do to get there, and then I do the work. And when I see evidence of this goal manifesting, bam, that's just now more evidence that I can do that's possible. And so then if it's possible here in fitness, where else in my life is this possible? And so like I said, when I started to learn that kind of stuff from a physical fitness perspective, I put that in my bio, right? It started to permeate all these other areas of my life, because now I had this level of confidence, right, that if I set a goal and I'm willing to work towards it, I can accomplish it. And I went through all of these phases with my fitness journey. I got unhealthy with it for a period of time, actually, where I got a bit neurotic I got really dysmorphic about my body image. And, I was like really, really, really obsessed with trying, just the six pack and being shredded and, just all that. And finally, luckily, I had some men around me who knew me well enough to know that something was off. Mm-hmm. Just by a share in a meeting or something, right? People would, and they'd be like, "Hey, man, you good? Are you okay?" And there were some who just knew. They were like, "Look, dude, we're concerned. We gotta, what's going on with you?"
Swapping addictions too, right? Like you can get addicted to exercise, just like you can be addicted to alcohol or drugs. That's right. So you've definitely taken, during your recovery process and how you contribute and how you support and help others, you definitely have an element that you're really focused on kind of men's wellness for sure. And you do this group, or at least tell me a little bit more about it, like journaling specifically for men.
Yeah. So I actually got to do a live about this with a friend of mine the other day. And the journaling piece, this all really ties in to emotional stability or emotional sobriety, whatever you want to call it, especially when it comes to men. And I it's hard now, because now in my life, I'm constantly surrounded by other men who feel this way and who know that expressing emotion as a man is totally okay. But there was a time in my life when that wasn't true. And so I have to remember that. And so it was really powerful for me. It was actually uncomfortable at first, because I had this false delusion that getting sober, everything was going to be perfect all the time. And I really did sort of believe that if I was doing everything exactly the way I was supposed to be doing it, that I was going to be happy, everything was going to be great all the time. And then any other emotion was just evidence that I was doing something wrong. And so anyways, I finally got woken up to the fact that now that I'm sober, means I'm going to be a human, which means I'm going to experience the full spectrum of human emotions that every other human experiences. And as a man, I think we tend to run from certain emotions, anything that makes us overly emotional or sad or anything like that, and I really just found a lot of power in being able to sit with those emotions and process them, journal about them, and just use them, right, as fuel, as motivation, as whatever. Because I feel like it's a superpower, honestly, to be able to tap into that and use it. And you can say, okay, what is it that's really going on here? Or whenever I feel myself getting angry or upset with somebody or a situation, right? This process of constantly journaling and going inside and talking about it. Now I have a different way of responding when these things happen. Maybe a situation occurs where, right, there's a level 3 response is appropriate, but I'm responding like at a level 7, and I know that's not an appropriate response to the situation. I can go, okay, what's going on? What is, I can go inside instead of reacting to the situation. I can go inside and start to get inquisitive about it, almost like, okay, what's going on here? Why am I reacting so strongly to this situation? It doesn't feel appropriate, And so going through all that, I feel like with men, at least in my life, and then I'm going to go back to Brene Brown a little bit when she talked about this. And this is really when I woke up to this, at least in my own life, right? When she talked to that man at her book signing before she ever studied men. She only studied women for a long time. And when the man said, you see those women over there, my wife and children, she said, they would rather see me die up on my white horse than ever fall off. And what he said to her was, the women in my life, as far as toxic masculinity or whatever you want to call it, they said, the women in my life have been tougher on me than the men in my life ever have. And I was like, it smacked me. I was like, wow.
Spoke to you, huh?
So yeah, so true. It was, at least for me. I'm not saying for everybody, but for me, that's been the truth. And then I started to realize why I was showing up in some of my intimate relationships the way I was, why I was responding to them in ways. And then when I heard that, I immediately understood why. I was like, oh, wow. And so of course I dove into therapy and started to kind of dig through some of that, and just my goal as a man, especially being as a masculine guy who has a history of going to prison and all this stuff, right, is to sort of fight against, and not just for men, by the way, but for women, just gender roles in general, these things that the society says, these are the things that are okay or not okay because you're a woman. And these are things that are okay or not okay because you're a man. And I just frankly think that's a bunch of bullshit, excuse my language. And so my goal there is to fight against those things and to treat each person like an individual, not generalize people by what gender they are, And so, that kind of stuff has really been, I think, a huge goal of mine, and I constantly am trying to learn and understand more so I can at least speak on it and have conversations about it.
Yeah, well, you definitely keep the conversation going and you're very open. And I just love all that you're up to. That's for sure. So Grant, where you're at with things in your life today in terms of your coaching and all that you give back to the community. One, I want to say thank you. And I really want to say thank you for sharing your story. We're going to switch gears right about now and go into some rapid fire questions. First question I'm going to ask is, tell me about the fish that's hanging on the back behind your head.
Oh, yeah. So
is that a marlin?
It's a sailfish. So that picture right there, my grandfather, my dad's dad, caught that fish in 1966. And so my grandmother just moved out of their house of 55 years and got rid of a bunch of stuff. She asked me if I would like to have it. So of course I took it immediately and put it right there. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, purpose.
Your least favorite word?
Oh, man. Excuses.
All right. If you could do any job other than the one that you're doing, like anything at all, like maybe something that you dreamed about when you were a kid of being, what would it have been?
A coach.
What kind of coach?
Like a baseball coach.
Because you're already kind of our coach right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's specifically like a sports, baseball, football. Something like that. I would love that.
Awesome. Tell me, what job do you think that's out there that you would absolutely never want to do? Like you would despise doing it?
President.
All right. Tell me your favorite sound.
My daughter's laugh.
Your least favorite sound.
Oh man. Well, okay. So my least favorite sound would probably be any sound that my daughter makes while if she's in pain. Or crying, screaming, anything like that.
Hits you right here, right in the heart, huh?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So let's assume there is a God or a God of your understanding, and you get up to the pearly gates and you're there. When he comes out to greet you, or she comes out to greet you, what would you like him to say? Well done, thy good and faithful servant. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for all the service that you do give. We're going to go into our positive interventions. And this is out of our daily guide, Positive Recovery Daily Guide, written by Dr. Jason Powers. And I'll open it up by kind of reading it. And then I'm going to ask you to share what your experience was with this intervention. So don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do, by John Wooden, written by John Wooden, that quote. No matter the current state of your health, a little movement is good. It helps your emotional, physical, and spiritual aspects. Moving the body can also help quiet the mind, release muscle tension, and increase levels of feel-good neurotransmitters. Exercise also keeps stress levels down. Areas of the world where people live in the longest, known as the blue zones, have several things in common. Notably, strenuous, lifelong physical activity is one of them. Sadly, if the bathroom, couch, and refrigerator were not in different places, some might hardly not move at all. So today's PI was to get moving. Do 30 minutes of physical activity. Park your car in the farthest possible parking space, walk to the store, take the stairs, and stand rather than sit. Ride a bike, do yoga, do walking meditation, or move in other ways you are able. Just do it. Remember to call one new person today, enhance your support network, and don't forget to keep leading with your 3 chosen strengths. So before we jump into your PI, here at Positive Recovery, all of our clients actually take what's called the VIA character strength test. So we help people to kind of identify their strengths, and maybe it's love or bravery or leadership or love of learning, curiosity, whatever those things might be. And so we really, everything we do here at Positive Recovery, we focus on people's character strengths. So I invite you at another time to take a look at your character strengths through the VIA. It's at viacharacterstrengths.org. And so that piece of it, if you haven't already jumped into it when you got this PI for you to do with us, feel free to do that. I'm lucky enough for our listeners to be able to have a Facebook kind of relationship with Grant, so we can go back and forth sometimes in Messenger. And it's always, I always smile when I get it in my inbox from Grant, because he's always got something good to say. But tell me about your getting moving. Did you do 30 minutes of physical activity today?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I can't imagine my life without doing that at this point. It's become it's so ingrained in me. I couldn't tell you what piece of the cake mix I could remove and still get the same result. So I keep that piece of the cake mix in there every day.
Awesome. And how do you encourage others to move?
Well, it depends on the person. I feel like the best way I can encourage people is to lead by example. To continue to do what we're doing right now, do it and share my experience, strength, and hope around it. And when I do so, I think other people are inspired from within to do it themselves. I think that works better than demanding it of somebody.
Well, for today's PI, I have not really been moving except my mouth a lot today. So I absolutely, Grant, I'm going to be inspired by you to move. So I will commit to moving for 30 minutes of physical activity after my day ends here. And I'll shoot you a message to let you know that I've done it, just in terms of my accountability piece. Thank you so much for inspiring and motivating others. I appreciate you being on Positive Recovery MD podcast. If someone wanted to reach out to you for coaching, whether that be from the recovery aspect of it, not sponsorship, but recovery coaching or movement or physical exercise, how could they reach out to you?
So they can reach out to me, my Instagram, fit.with.grant, or Facebook is Grant Hanson. Emails grant@fitwithgrant.com. Then I have the websites are fitwithgrant.com, and then we have recoveryclubamerica.com, which launched today. So it's going to be a full.
Woo! Just today? We're part of your launch?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So there's a team of us. I'm just one of the guys, but there's a team of us that have worked on putting this together, and it's going to be really, really powerful, very powerful platform. We're excited. We're really excited about it. So go to the website. You can download. There's a community version that's just free that you can get. There's an app you can download, and so there's going to be more. There'll be more rolling out constantly. So,
well, thanks, Grant, and thank you for our listeners for today. That's it for us on Positive Recovery MD. Until next time, thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.